Meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Today we are meeting in public to continue our discussions and reach decisions on the committee's future business. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, we'll do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. Please be reminded that screenshots are not allowed, and we would discourage you from doing that. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy of October 19th, 2021, we will be following all appropriate protocols to remain healthy and safe. I do not intend to offer anything more by way of preliminaries. This is committee business, and the floor is open. Okay, so I'm going to, I recognize Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'll start by thanking the clerk for arranging to have name tags here so we know who each other are. That's great. We've had, and I'll appreciate colleagues from all parties. I know that many of us have had many conversations since the last meeting so that we can move forward productively on the committee. Doesn't really matter. I don't think necessarily which order we go in, but maybe we'll start with the human resources study. Is that okay? I guess I move that we will, in the spirit of cooperation, we'll move it to finish that particular motion with the understanding that we will then move to the children's health study motion. Is that fair? And this is a bit tough for me because I really don't believe in the principle of apportioning witnesses. I think I made that clear enough last time around, but we have had some conversations. I don't want this to be a precedent, but within that motion, we're prepared to amend it to say that we would, wherever we put it in the motion, I can't remember exactly where it was, that the witnesses be allocated 1/3 to the Liberal Party, 1/3 to the Conservative Party, 1/6 to the NDP, and 1/6 to the Bloc Québécois.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lake. I appreciate the intervention. I want to make sure that procedurally we are sound here. So what I take from your intervention is first that you are proposing that we continue the discussion at this meeting where we left off at the last one, and you are further proposing an amendment. So I guess I'll start with this. Is it the consensus of the committee to proceed in this fashion, that we pick up where we left off from the last meeting? We have consensus in the room. Okay, I recognize Mr. Davies. Just before I give you the floor, Mr. Davies, if we are to proceed from the point where we left off the last meeting, we would actually have to deal with your amendment. But I'll recognize you because I'm guessing that if we do have agreement, you'll withdraw your amendment. But over to you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I find it unwieldy when we begin a meeting by saying we'll pick up where we left off, because I'm not sure that it's all that helpful. I'm not really sure we all are on the same page where it left off. I think we should just start afresh this meeting, but I think we all understand what Mike has suggested. It might be wise procedurally for the clerk to read the two motions, but basically I think, if I'm understanding correctly, we're going to go with Mr. Hanley's motion to study the healthcare human resources crisis first. I thought I understood that there might be a change to the number of meetings proposed in there. for witnesses. I'm not sure. I'll leave that to Mike to clarify. And then we're also going to then move after that study to the study on children's health that had been moved by Mr. Berthold, I think. I think we will need to have both those motions just formally read for your benefit, Mr. Chair and Clerk. And I understand that one thing I wanted to clarify is that the witnesses in both cases will be as per the formula that Mr. Lake described.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davies. I think that's I think you're bang on. So we can deal with one motion at a time. I see that Dr. Hanley is next on the speakers list. So what I would propose is Dr. Hanley, it's your motion. If you would please read the health study motion that is before us, and then we can have Mr. Lake.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, point of order.
A point of order, is Mr. Berthold?
Yeah, just in order to do it in the correct way, I think we should continue what you just said. Continue the discussion on the amendment from Mr. Davies. He should withdraw it. Okay, so after that we can go back to the motion. Another motion would be proposed by Mr. Lake about the number of witnesses, and another motion will be moved to change the number of meeting. I think this is the correct way to address it, and after that we will do the same with the children health, because there are already a debate on the children health study, so we need to do that in procedurally correct, just to be sure that we deal with everything. It will be easy today, Mr. Chair, I think, because what I'm feeling in the room is that everyone wants to achieve something. So if we are doing it in order, we will be able to do it correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Berthold. Mr. Clerk, could you please read the motion that is before the committee from Dr. Hanley?
Absolutely. Mr. Hanley moved that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee, in recognition of exhaustion and burnout amongst healthcare professionals, undertake a study on how the federal government can facilitate the recruitment and retention of physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, and other healthcare providers to the public healthcare system, including a focus on rural and northern communities. That this study be prioritized by the House of Commons Committee on Health in the 44th Parliament, that the committee invite experts and representatives to appear, that the committee hold a minimum of 8 meetings with witnesses on this study, that the committee present its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee request a comprehensive response to the report by the government. And there's a pending motion by Mr. Davies to that, or a pending amendment by Mr. Davies to that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Davies has his hand up, and it would be in order if we proceed as Mr. Berthold has suggested, and I think it makes sense to withdraw your amendment for the sake of clarity, and then we can go forward with Mr. Lake's suggestion. Mr. Davies, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I am happy to withdraw it, but again, I think for purposes of the next 2, 3, or 4 years of the committee operating as it may be, or 1 more year, I think it's important that we do get straight whether or not we pick up a new meeting with the business that was at the end of the previous meeting pending. It's my experience that it's not. It's my experience that the last meeting's done, anything died, the order of business died, and we started a meeting afresh. And I'm happy to withdraw it, but to me, I think it'd be helpful for us all to be on the same page so we know procedurally how we're going to operate. I would suggest that you start every meeting fresh. Dr. Hanley has moved his motion. My amendment last time, it ended in indeterminate debate. Because otherwise, if we do it the way that Mr. Berthold suggests.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in order to move ahead, no one in the room, just so Don, I know you're not here, but no one in the room is disagreeing with you. So can we just move on? That's the way it's always been. We agree that that's the way it's always been. That's the way it was in the last meeting. No one's disagreeing with that.
Go ahead, Mr. Davies.
If I might, Mr. Lake, Mr. Berthold said I had to withdraw my motion to amend. That's exactly what I'm responding to. My motion to amend was in the last meeting, and the meeting was talked out and concluded with that motion never being voted on. So what I'm trying to clarify is that when we come to this meeting, there's nothing for me to withdraw. That's what I'm trying to clarify. And it was Mr. Berthold who raised that. So procedurally, if we're going to proceed on that basis, that the thing we were last discussing at the previous meeting is what we opened a new meeting with, I can deal with that. That's not been my experience. I don't think we should go that way. That's the only reason I wanted to clarify, Mike, just to make sure that there's nothing for me to withdraw.
Okay, Mr. Davies, you are exactly right, and if this helps to clarify things, that what you have said is entirely consistent with the rules of procedure. I've come across this question before. We considered it at the start of the last meeting. So you are right. Technically, there is nothing for you to withdraw. I simply asked you to do it for the sake of clarity and because it was suggested by Mr. Berthold. But technically, it isn't necessary. So we now have a motion on the floor, and I'm going to go to Mr. Lake because I believe he wishes to propose an amendment.
Yes, and I hope for simplicity, I'm going to move them both at the same time because they're right in the same spot on the motion. So the amendment will be that where it says 8 meetings, we're going to remove 8 meetings with witnesses on this study. And in the place of that, we're going to say 6 meetings with witnesses on this study, semicolon, that witnesses for this study be allocated in the following fashion: 1/3 for the Liberal Party members of the committee, 1/3 for the Conservative Party members of the committee, 1/6 for the Bloc Québécois member of the committee, and 1/6 for the New Democratic member of the committee. And then, of course, it will just continue with the part about the committee presenting its findings and recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. The amendment is in order. Colleagues, it's been pointed out to me that to the extent that there was a withdrawal of Mr. Davies' amendment, and I would say that there was, we actually require the consent of the committee in order for it to be withdrawn. Do we have it?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have that cleaned up. The debate is now on the amendment proposed by Mr. Lake. And Dr. Hanley had his hand up quite some time ago. Is it still your wish to intervene, Dr. Hanley?
No, I am good. Thank you. I appreciate the initial intervention by Mr. Lake.
And for the clerk in the room, okay, I recognize Mr. Thériault. À vous la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify something to be sure. We are talking about the number of witnesses that would be heard or that would be suggested, because we have been talking about the last meeting and we were talking about witnesses lists. We can suggest witnesses, but when we make up groups, sometimes out of 6 witnesses, let's say we have 2 groups of witnesses, 2 panels, and we have 3 witnesses for each panel to make it more simple. So it means that we have 6 witnesses for the meeting. There would be 2 Liberal, 2 Conservatives, 1 NDP, and 1 Bloc. Is that what? Am I right? Is that something that you can confirm? Question. What would happen if we were to adopt this amendment in that way, not on the number that we can suggest, but the number of witnesses that can be heard? There's a difference. What happens then if a witness is not available? So is this something that is binding or not? Will the meeting still happen if we don't have the right pro rata, the right ratio?
Simple question.
That's my question. To be clarified, please.
This is precisely why I hate this process. We are moving ahead with this process because it was pretty clear in the last meeting that this was the will of Liberal and NDP members. But I would indicate that if we go ahead with this process, I mean, obviously we don't want to stop having meetings. I would hope that we see how it works in this particular study and maybe the second study, and that common sense will prevail as we sort of move forward with those studies. And if a circumstance like that arises, we can find a way together by consensus to figure it out. But we will make every effort that we can to have the actual number of witnesses that appear before the committee to meet this allocation. And in reference to your mathematical understanding, Mr. Theriault, yes, that is clear. So the idea, the example you gave of 2, 2, 1, and 1, that is the what we're shooting for with this proposal.
Mr. Lake, Mr. Davies.
Yeah, I would just like to say, first of all, thank you to all my colleagues, and particularly to Mr. Lake and my Conservative colleagues. I appreciate the compromise they've made and that everybody's made. And what I can say is, at this point, you know, with that clarification, I think I'm prepared to just trust in the process and to trust in Mr. Chair and Mr. Clerk. Nobody's going to be, at least for speaking for myself, I'm not going to be looking for mathematical certainty to the second decimal point. You know, it's just going to be, this is a rough approximation, and as long as everybody's working good faith towards that number, I'm not going to sweat a witness here and there. You know, we're talking about a first study. I think maybe the first 2 are probably going to have 6 meetings is what I'm anticipating. So if you're looking at 24 meetings, or 24 witnesses, pardon me, for witnesses per meeting, that's 24. It's going to work out very well. You know, 1/3 is 8. So it'll be 8 witnesses for the cons, 8 for the libs. And the remainder will be split, I think, 4 and 4 for the Bloc and the NDP. It'll work for 3 meetings when there's 12. I think that'll work out. You know, it'll be 4, 4, 2, and 2. I think there's a problem if we only have 2 meetings, but I think you've clarified that very generously, Mike. I appreciate that. But if there's 1 meeting that we have on something and it turns out that it's 2 Liberal witnesses and 2 Conservatives, if that's how it is, I'm okay with that. As long as we do our best to roughly approximate this number. For my part, I'm not going to be sweating, you know, supreme accuracy for this.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Are there any further interventions? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Monsieur Theriault, s'il vous plaît.
Consulting, monsieur.
Je disais qu'on peut, on peut.
We can go ahead with the amendment. However, I do have another question. I'm wondering if I should ask my question right now to try and go faster. Here is why. When we adopted the fact that we would consider all of the evidence that was provided in the first studies in the previous parliament, this was to be able to follow up with the discussion on the pandemic. We did not mention this in the 2 meetings of the committee, but there was a tacit agreement saying that out of 28 meetings, 14 would be about following up on the pandemic. And we wanted to take the evidence into account, and 14 would be allocated to new studies. And now we have spent 2 meetings already. And now I realize that we are going to adopt a motion with giving to a study 6 meetings, another for 8. So that means 14 meetings for 2 studies that will be carried out, which means that there won't be any room for any other studies from other parties. So I will be moving amendments on the number of meetings allocated to those studies.
Merci, Monsieur Thériault. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut...
Thank you, Mr. Thériault. Someone wants to reply?
Monsieur Berthold?
Est-ce qu'on peut...
Can we... I have a suggestion for about the children, because we have at least 2 meetings about that we could be spending on COVID. Everything that related to COVID. So we would have 4 studies about children in general. So that would give some room for other studies as well.
Merci, Monsieur Berthold.
Thank you, Mr. Berthold.
Mentions in respect of the amendment of Mr. Lake. Mr. Davies.
Just that I appreciate my colleagues' concern, but I think, you know, we're in some ways we're a bit hostage to fortune and the agenda and things that we can't foresee. For instance, legislation coming before this committee. So I think getting 1 or 2 studies done before June is actually good. And, you know, of course, we're going to be coming back. I don't think anybody foresees any election in the summer. So we're going to be coming back in the fall, and there'll be time to pick up other studies, including some of the excellent suggestions that Mr. Thériault has had. So I don't think we should, for my part, I'm not bothered if we don't get 4 studies done by June. I think we'll be doing well if we can get 2 studies and reports done by then. I think that particularly, and I don't view the COVID portion of this as being unimportant. I still think that it is a very, very important role of this committee to keep, as I call it, a watching brief on COVID every week as we call witnesses and stay up to speed on the new developments half time. And as we chip away at the studies, I'm comfortable with having 1 or 2 studies done by June, and I know that we'll get to Mr. Thériault's issues in due course, as I hope we'll get to at least one of mine.
Mr. Lake, please.
Question.
Seeing no one else on the speakers list, I believe we are now ready for the question. The vote is on the amendment proposed by Mr. Lake. Is it the consensus of the meeting to adopt the amendment? Do we have consensus? We have consensus in the room. The amendment is adopted. The debate now is on the motion as amended. Any discussion? Seeing none, is it the will of the meeting to adopt the motion as amended? I believe we have consensus. The motion is adopted. Thank you, colleagues. The floor is open. Mr. Lake.
We have some momentum. So we're coming to, I'll move that we discuss, I don't know, move. I'm going to start discussing Mr. Berthold's motion on child health. And in the spirit of what Mr. Davies said, we'll go back to the original motion. I think that a change, just to remind everybody, a change had been made to Luke's original motion to make sure that we had addressing children's nutritional needs in it. So it's already in the motion, so we don't need to make that amendment just in case it comes up. We had adopted, well, it had already been changed in your original motion, I think. It's 6 meetings, so we're good with that. We will, again, we'd said that we would try this formula out in 2 motions, so we're going to add the exact same wording into this motion after point number 3. The study consists of a minimum of 6 witness meetings. We would add the same language, which is that witnesses for this study be allocated in the following fashion: 1/3 for the Liberal Party members of the committee, 1/3 for the Conservative Party members of the committee, 1/6 for the Bloc Québécois member of the committee, and 1/6 for the New Democratic member of the committee. I'll move that amendment. And then I think there was an amendment that the Bloc had wanted to move last time. I think we had agreed to it, but it didn't actually ever get officially wired in. So just a reminder to Mr. Theriault that he may want to do that afterwards. But I'll just leave my amendment as is right now.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. I'm going to go back to the excellent advice that Mr. Berthoud gave us as we launched into the debate on the last motion, and ask that Mr. Berthoud, if you would please formally move your motion, and then we will have the specific wording around the debate just for clarity. So, Mr. Berthoud, you're next on the speaker's order anyway. If you could formally move your motion, then we actually have a motion on the table. Thank you.
I move it, Mr. Speaker. Je la dépose.
I move my motion so that we may discuss it, as this is a very important topic, and I won't be speaking for a long time. I will leave my colleague now presenting an amendment.
All right. So that everyone is clear on where we are, Mr. Clerk, would you be able to read the motion that was presented by Ms. Berthoud, I believe, at the last meeting or the one before that? That's the motion we're on, I presume.
Yes, so there's agreement of the committee to resume debate on the following motion that was moved by Mr. Berthold. And this is the amended version as it was amended by Ms. Vignola 2 meetings ago. So I will read it now. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on children's health and the recent impact the pandemic has had on children, and that the study include, but not be limited to, addressing healthcare service backlogs affecting children, addressing interprovincial barriers for research, data collection and sharing on children's health, addressing children's nutritional needs, addressing shortages of qualified healthcare workers capable of dealing with children's health issues in order to find potential solutions. The study include a focus on disparities in access to services for rural, Indigenous, racialized, and lower income communities. The study consists of a minimum of 6 witness meetings, that the Minister of Health be invited to appear for one of these meetings, and the committee present its findings and recommendation to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. That is the motion that is currently under consideration by the committee. And Mr. Lake, you had some specific wording on an amendment. If you could please now formally propose the amendment, then we'll have a debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
There is
Chair.
one other item, if I may.
Excuse me, Mr. Lake. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
I do apologize, but I must flag that there's a similar issue with this motion where there is a pending amendment by Mr. Davies that was never disposed with. The meeting adjourned before a decision was taken, and that amendment is similar to the one we dealt with this meeting about equal number of witnesses. So that would also need to be withdrawn or voted on before a new amendment can be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, but I think we agreed that because it wasn't dealt with and it hasn't been reintroduced, that what is properly before the committee is the motion and the motion only. So we're going to proceed on that basis. Mr. Lake, please, with your amendment.
So my amendment would come after point 3, the study consists of a minimum of 6 witness meetings, and at that point we would insert that witnesses for this study be allocated in the following fashion: 1/3 for the Liberal Party members of the committee, 1/3 for the Conservative Party members of the committee, 1/6 for the Bloc Québécois member of the committee, and 1/6 for the New Democratic member of the committee.
The amendment is in order. The debate is on the amendment. Monsieur Berthoud, voulez-vous intervenir?
Mr. Berthoud, would you like to speak? No, I'm sorry. Mr. Thériault. Mr. Thériault, I think, raised his hand. Yes, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that Ms. Vignola's amendment had been integrated in the wording, and the clerk has read that, so I have no problem on that. Thank you.
Are there any further interventions on the amendment of Mr. Lake? Seeing none, is it the will of the committee to adopt the amendment as proposed by Mr. Lake? I see consensus on the screen. Do we have consensus in the room? We do. The motion is therefore amended, and the debate now is on the motion as amended. Discussion. There is no one on the speakers list. Are we ready for the question? The motion as amended is before you. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion as amended? We have consensus in the room. We have consensus on the screen. The motion is therefore adopted. Monsieur Thériault.
Mr. Thériault? You're on mute. I would like to make a proposal or speak about a proposal that pursuant to Article 108.2, the committee undertake a study for the follow-up on improvements that have been set up to improve Health Canada's rules and to improve the monitoring of medical devices in 2018, and to assess the possibility to have a traceability register that would be mandatory for practitioners that proceed with the mammal implant, their withdrawal or replacement, and that some data be put on the register, and that the committee hold a minimum of 2 meetings with witnesses. B, the committee make a report of these findings to the House. C, pursuant to Article 109, the committee offer a detailed response to the report. Mr. Chair, given the fact that this motion, well, this was a motion that I had written according to the discussions that we had, to the effect that we wanted to have several smaller studies until June. I think that this is a topic that deserves us to look at it a bit more. So we had. I would like to increase the number of meetings to 4 meetings, and this is a topic that has been discussed in this legislature, this parliament, for many years. There have been many attempts of legislation from former MPs from the NDP, and also bills to try to set up a register for mammal implants. As the time we speak, it's still not done in 2022, but there has been, like this motion mentions, there has been a tightening of the rules. In 2006, we had accepted that some types of implants, silicone implants, be accepted, and this caused problems. Which explains the tightening of the rules. But it's important that we have a follow-up about the situation in 2022. What has been set up in 2018, is it still working? Listening to witnesses that will entertain us about what they have experienced. And I think it is quite, well, just to make a short story, the difficulty that we have in this file.
The issue that we have is that in these cases, usually problems arise 10, 15 years later. Those same practitioners who implanted these implants are retired, given there's no registry. Women who are dealing with problems or don't actually know if there may be a potential problem can't look into what was implanted. When we know now that most breast implants were implanted in contexts of reconstruction, often in the context of cancer, it's important to solve this issue once and for all. But we shouldn't presume the conclusions nor recommendations that might arise. This is a study we would like to see be very specific, because when studies are too broad, rarely do we manage to drill down on the main recommendation enough that that would lead to a bill, that would lead to some action. Here, in this context, is very specific. We want to finally recognize that everything that's happened over the years should actually have led, over all this time and effort, should have led to some kind of registry. There you have it. I have a 26-page file here that I will not read for you today. But if you have any questions on the relevance of this motion, I'd be pleased to entertain that with my colleagues' questioning. Thank you, Mr. Thériault. I have a technical question. You presented a motion that was completely in order, but then I got the impression that you put forward a change or an amendment to your motion. Your motion is in order, and we will debate it. Now there's an amendment proposed by the same member who moved the motion in the first place. So for that, we would need unanimous consent to amend your motion. Do we have unanimous consent for Mr. Thériault, so he may amend his own motion? That is to increase the number of meetings for the study up to 4 meetings. Is there unanimous consent for that? I recognize Mr. Berthold. Just a proposal for Mr. Thériault. Instead of saying, 4 mandatory meetings, why not just say at least 2? And if need be, then we could add more. If we need to hear more witnesses, if we need more information, I think that would be more effective. we would get everyone's consent, I think, if we proceeded in that way.
Mr. Van Koeverden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's nice to see everybody virtually. Sorry, I'm not there with you in Ottawa. I appreciate that we are still focusing on committee business, likely till the end of today's meeting. But I also believe that with about 6 meetings for human health resources and with a child health care study, in addition to our 12 or so meetings on COVID, that it probably brings us until June. So I would just I'm wondering aloud here if it wouldn't be prudent to move on and discuss a third such meeting, a third such study at a later time, and focus on bringing witnesses and ensuring that our meeting on next week, Monday and Wednesday, are productive ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Koeverden. Just before I go to Mr. Theriault in response to Ms. Berthoud, I'm advised that the motion as presented already indicates a minimum of 2 meetings, but I took Mr. Theriault to propose that number be changed to 4, but I recognize Mr. Theriault at this time.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That's right. When I presented it, I could have said 4 right off the bat. I was reading the motion for which there was a notice that was tabled as a notice of motion, and I made the comment that I wanted it to be there to be in the number 4. It looks like an amendment. I didn't put forward an amendment. I just simply said to the colleagues, that's the one, because often people don't recognize the motions that we have. Look, I think we should have 4 meetings on this. It's possible that we might find other types of problems.
Point of order, sir, please.
Yes, Dr. Ellis, I presume?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'm not entirely sure that you can amend your own motion, so it's a bit of a moot point if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, no, you're not mistaken, which is why I asked for the unanimous consent of the committee for it to happen, and that hasn't happened yet.
Right. Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, Mr. Theriault.
Okay, well, is there consent or not? I'm not going to try to plug this any further. I would prefer us to start with 4. Mr. Davies was talking about a program that could, a schedule of meetings that could go up until the fall. I'm putting forward this motion. The first 2 motions lead us almost to the month of June. I don't think there's a problem with passing this motion, which would include 4 meetings.
Okay, before we go any further, Dr. Ellis is quite right. We should bring this to a head. Is there or is there not unanimous consent for Mr. Theriault to amend his motion to a minimum of 4 meetings? Because if there is not unanimous consent, then someone else will have to move such an amendment and we can vote on it. So is there unanimous consent to allow him to so amend his motion? There isn't consent. All right. So the debate is on the main motion. It would be in order if anyone else wishes to move the amendment for us to do so. But the motion that Mr. Theriault made is receivable. It's before us, and the debate is on the main motion, which prescribes a minimum of 2 meetings. And I recognize Mr. Lake.
I just want to somewhat support Adam in moving on. I think the easiest way to do that is if we're all in agreement with pursuing this study, we hopefully can keep debate to a minimum. It doesn't put this study third in the order. It just says we're eventually going to study it. We agree that at some point we'll study it, and let's pass it and move on to other business. We've had a productive meeting so far. Let's keep it going.
Dr. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I would like My colleagues' comments and agree with Michel Thériault that this is a very important study and it should be included in our list, absolutely.
Mr. Thériault.
All right, Mr. Chair. Well, I will speak regarding what Mr. Berthold says. The motion does say a minimum of 2 meetings. And yes, based on how our meetings proceed, I think when colleagues will be in the heart of the matter, I think, like Mr. Ellis just said, colleagues will likely accept our arriving at the right number of meetings in order to be relevant, to have relevant recommendations coming out of a good report. Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Interventions in respect of the motion, Mr. Van Koeverden.
Thank you. Appreciate support from Mr. Lake. I do think that it's something worth considering later on. I would just offer that my honest assessment of the situation is it's really outside the realm of an emergency pandemic time. And I think there would be rationale to study breast health in a broader context. I recognize the relevance and I recognize the timeliness of the motion, but at present, I hope that we can move on to the business of our next 24 meetings or so, and commit to coming back to this at a later date.
Mr. Davies.
Yeah, I think we do need to come to an understanding on what exactly we're deciding if we vote in favor of this motion. If it's just to say, yes, we agree to study it at some point, but it's not necessarily the next study after we conclude the study on child health. I think we need to clarify that because again, I'm sort of like Mr. Van Koeverden. I'm not saying that this isn't something that I wouldn't want to study at some point, but I'm not sure that it would be something that I think should be studied given the priorities that we have. Third, I also think it's important to be clear on and very, very clear-headed on the number of meetings we have. When we say 6 meetings and 6 meetings, we're talking about 6 meetings of witnesses. If I'm not mistaken. So I wanted to clarify that. I'm pretty sure it's always hard when I don't have the actual text in front of me, but I think we agreed. And if I could have a nod of your head, Mr. Chair, that the motion, or maybe from the clerk, that it's 6 meetings of witnesses for each of the 2 studies we just passed.
That would certainly be my interpretation, Mr.
Yeah.
Davies. Yeah.
So that in practice really means that we're talking about 8, 9, or 10 meetings for that study, because after you hear the witnesses, there's usually a meeting to discuss instructions to the analyst for the report, and then there's usually at least 1 meeting. My experience is usually 2, sometimes 3, to finalize the report. So really, you're looking at somewhere between 7 and 10 meetings for each of those studies. When you add to that the fact we already know there's been a bill that has been introduced in the House by the Minister of Health on the rapid tests, that's coming to this committee as well. So we are not going to get to any other study besides the 2 that we've talked about. In fact, we may not finish the children's health study by June, but hopefully we do. The other thing is, I don't know, speaking for myself, the discussion that we had about when we were blue skying committee business about having a series of short studies or longer ones was never voted on or decided. It was a good idea, perhaps, but I don't think we ever came to a firm conclusion on that. That was an idea that was suggested by Mr. Berthold and then by Mr. Thériault. But I don't think, in fairness, we came to a conclusion that this committee was going to have a series of short studies. So then the question really becomes, of all of the notices of motion, all of the potential studies that are on, is this particular study of such a pressing nature and of such widespread interest that it would warrant this committee's time And I must say that I find it very granular. I've had the opportunity to have one discussion with Mr. Theriault about this, and similarly, our minds are in the generally same area because I have a motion on breast health generally that includes breast screening guidelines, wait times for diagnostic services, access to treatment, and options to improve health outcomes that I think could be, like Mr. Van Koeverden said, broadened to include the very important issue of breast implant registry. But I find a breast implant registry itself, it would be very appropriate if we had decided to have targeted short studies. But if we're not doing that, then it's very, very granular, and in my opinion, affects profoundly, but a very small number of Canadians. Whereas something like breast health generally affects, well, I'm going to say 51% of the population. And in fact, someone pointed out to me, breast health actually can affect men as well. But primarily it's women, where we're talking about millions and millions and millions of women who have an interest in access to timely breast screening and services and breast health. So I guess those are just my general thoughts on this. We also have motions that have been moved on oral health, which I've moved, and substance use and addiction, that I think, in my respectful view, with great respect to the importance of this issue that Mr. Theriault is championing, affect far more people and are of more urgency in terms of the impacts they have on a broad number of people. Not to take away, of course, the significance of this issue to those that are interested in. I have to say, I've been an MP for more years, and for 14 years, and I don't think I've ever been contacted by anybody who has an issue over a registry of breast implant. But I have many people contacting me about lack of access to dental care, or the opioid crisis, or breast health generally. So I'm happy to support this motion on the understanding that this vote not specify that we will be studying this issue after, like, as our third study. But if that's okay with Mr. Theriault, then I'm happy to support it. But if I'd like him to clarify whether or not it's his intention to, by passing of this motion, for it to be the third study, because if that were the case, I would move an amendment to broaden it to include breast health generally, so that it not only includes the issues he wants to look at, which are important, but also the broader issues.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I am advised that there's a technical problem in the room with respect to an inability to turn MPs' microphones off. It doesn't affect those that are here on Zoom, but I'm going to suspend the meeting for 5 to 10 minutes. I would encourage you to talk among yourselves to see if we can get through this during the suspension. The meeting is now suspended. I'm pleased to advise that it appears that the technical issues are resolved and we can now continue. Next on the speakers list is Dr. Pawlowski.
It's coming.
I wonder if Luke could clarify, I think there's been a number of people have questioned, is his motion to have this motion proceed as the third set of meetings, or this is just a motion that at some point we will do the study that he wants?
Happy to have Mr. Theriault intervene. It is not specified in the study. It's not specified in the motion, but he can clarify his intent to Mr. Theriault, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's not specified in the motion, but I'm really surprised by this question. I'm really surprised because as things stand, this is a motion that could probably not be the subject of our discussions until likely the fall session. Under fair play, every party would, put forward its priorities or one of its priorities. When Dawn says yes, but there's breast health in general, I understand what he's saying, breast health, and how to address breast health, Mr. Chairman. How can you do that? Given this motion by Mr. Davies, his motion is excellent, but how not to address this in the context of the pandemic? How can we talk about accessibility of treatment, accessibility, reducing timelines for diagnosis, if we completely do away with the pandemic? There was a pre-pandemic and there is the pandemic. So all of these aspects, I think, could be in a theme, a follow-up theme during the pandemic. But this motion is too specific. But, this motion does have some virtues. It is specific, actually. That's its very pro. It is so specific, and it's a short duration study, and that means that the committee would arrive at something, would arrive at a recommendation that would be strong. And the study states, the motion states, why wouldn't it be relevant given the fact that women are experiencing, or women have, maybe some women have had breast implants, have had reconstruction? Why is it that Health Canada is responsible for approval, but on some level there's no traceability in case of an incident or a problem? Isn't it important for a register to exist? So that specificity will mean that over time, it is limited, and a committee like ours always needs to, in my view, I've only been doing this for 2 years, mind you, at this committee, at least, but a committee like this always needs short, specific studies, which can, at some point, lead to longer studies being done with longer, that longer studies would have time to lead to something for us. I personally just saw this as being a positive. I understand Mr. Davies' motions is also positive, but I think it can fall within half of the pandemic follow-up meetings because at this point, no healthcare services. If you look at the collateral effects of the pandemic, the study that I had initiated during that third wave, you can see that screening, access to breast cancer screening, this is one of the significant forms of cancer. We've seen that has had an effect. So in that respect, I wouldn't want to be kind of as an aside to a very interesting motion, mind you, but that could be addressed within the 14 sessions relating to the pandemic, whereas my motion does not fall within that. Whether it be the 4th or the 5th, Mr. Chairman, often committee business varies, etc. I'm quite open. But I would not want this study to be disqualified based on arguments relating to the fact that it's too specific. I think that it being specific is positive. I've explained that. And I hope that colleagues will give this motion its due significance. I could send them the literature that exists on this matter, and I think they will see that it's important. It's not a matter of absolute numbers of women who are experiencing this. That there be one woman who is dealing with the stress of having had approved implants, for this woman to have cancer recur, that's already one too many. So how could we, Mr. Chairman, quite openly take the most appropriate measures so that never again will a woman who has cancer, who has the breast reconstruction, find herself in the situation where she's dealing with this anxiety 20 years later if there is a problem. I don't think we should discredit this motion on the basis of the fact that there was something more important out there. What's important? Yes, of course, is the pandemic, but within the pandemic, do people have access to care? Mr. Davies may want to put forward his motion in the context of the effects of the pandemic or the follow-up to the pandemic. I would like us to be able to pass this motion.
Yes, Dr. Ellis?
Mr. Lake, but...
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see you. I'm trying to go by voices. Go ahead, Mike. Yep.
It's not really a point of order, but I'm going to say just super quickly, I think this motion will pass if we just let it come to a vote. I suspect that it'll pass, given that he's not moving, that it's number 3 in the priority list or anything like that, and we can get on to planning next week's meetings, which is really important for us.
You're right. It's not a point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Theriault.
Wait.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lake is not the only one who gets to speak for an extended period just when it suits him. I didn't say that. I didn't say what he seems to have understood. I didn't say that I didn't want it to be third. Not at all. I said that it would probably not be studied until the fall, that I would like it to be studied this fall, and the sooner the better. Because women's health depends on it. And they expect that we'll be able to address such an important, specific issue that's of concern to these women. And in this regard, I don't see why. I mean, did someone ask about the Conservatives' motion, about the Liberals' motion? Does it need to be the first, second, third? No. No, it just kind of, based on this same notion of fair play, we just kind of assumed that we would open with the Liberals, that we would pass the Conservatives as well, and it seems to me then it was up to me to propose another, because no one was proposing anything else so far. And so in the order of things, given the fact that we know the number of meetings and that I myself haven't changed the number of meetings we can expect, I wasn't expecting this motion to be heard until the month of June in this study. And in that sense, I don't think it's a problem, given its specificity, to have this issue, to have it be in third position. If anyone thinks that's a problem, that it be third in the fall, just convince me of it.
Moi, je suis pas.
I'm not convinced.
Je suis pas convaincu.
I'm not convinced that we're going to get to the end of the second study by June, because there's always going to be unpredictability. And there will be meetings that have to be held to hear a minister on a given problem that is an emergency, 1064s. And so, no, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be considered in third place. I'm saying its specificity, its short duration actually means that it's an advantage. It could be addressed, I think, without a problem at the right time.
Merci, Mr. Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Mr. Lake, but before I go to Mr. Lake, as we're rapidly approaching the appointed hour, I'm going to throw open the suggestion that we perhaps talk about a deadline for briefs for the 2 or 3 studies that we've committed to, witnessed deadlines for those studies in terms of getting witnesses in. But we are on Mr. Thériault's motion, and Mr. Lake is next up. So I recognize Mr. Lake. Go ahead.
You can take my name off the list, but I'll just say, if we all stop talking, we can come to a vote and move on to that other idea about planning the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Van Couverton.
I removed my hand so that we could vote.
Dr. Pawlowski.
I remove my hand too.
Are there any further interventions on the motion? Seeing none, it sounds like we're ready for the question. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion of Mr. Thériault by consent, or is it necessary to have a standing vote?
We need a vote.
All right, Mr. Clerk, if you could please do a standing vote. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. The vote is on the motion of Monsieur Thériault to initiate a study on registry of medical devices. Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Clerk, could you please talk louder? We can't barely understand you.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully this is better. The vote is on the motion of Monsieur Thériault to initiate a study on medical devices in a registry. Mr. Hanley.
I vote for.
Mr. Johari.
I vote for.
Mr. Pawlowski.
I vote for.
Ms. Sidhu.
I vote for.
Mr. Van Couverton.
I vote for.
Mr. Berthold.
I vote for. En faveur. Oui, d'accord.
Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
Ms. Kramp-Nyman.
Yes.
Mr. Lake.
Oui.
Mr. Thériault.
Oui.
Mr. Davies.
Oui.
Mr. Chair, all yeas.
Thank you very much. The motion is adopted, and we're very close to our allotted time. But if we're going to move to getting these studies set up, there's really 3 things that we need to do. One is to adopt a word limit for briefs, because we would normally call for briefs to be submitted for anyone who is appearing or anyone who we're not able to accommodate as a witness. We need to set a deadline for witness lists. So at least those 2 things. So we have right now adopted studies in respect of COVID, in respect of workforce, and in respect of child health, and in respect of medical devices. So my understanding is that we're going to proceed immediately with COVID and workforce. So perhaps if we could take the advice of the committee as to a deadline and a word limit for briefs and a deadline for witness lists, please. And I would also invite...
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I apologize to interrupt. Mr. Lake has his hand raised. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And I didn't have my chat up. Mr. Lake, you have the floor.
Yeah, just trying to be as quick as we can. We did have the opportunity to have some conversation in the room while technical difficulties were happening. The suggestion would be that we do a COVID briefing as that COVID update on Monday, and then on Wednesday we have our first meeting with witnesses on the human resources study, and that the deadline for witnesses be 5 o'clock tomorrow Eastern time for us to submit witness lists for that to start the committee study on next Wednesday.
Sounds like you had productive discussions. Has Mr. Lake captured the consensus of the committee? Mr. Davies?
Well, I appreciate the efficiency. I think that's very, very fast. I mean, we have 6 meetings, that's 24 witnesses. In order to, consider who might want to testify and that to give us less than a day is too fast. I also must confess that I've been wondering about whether we will, with the volume of material that has been prepared by the analysts, whether 1 day is sufficient for a briefing of to summarize the COVID evidence. To me, I would suggest that we take next week, Monday and Wednesday, to review the COVID evidence, get briefed. Then we have a break week after that, and then we can pick up the study after that, because we also have to have witnesses for the COVID study. So to me, it makes sense to get ready to start the week after the break week with one of the days on COVID and one of the days on the first day of the human resources study. And now that I wouldn't suggest we take too much more time, because I think the other thing is that we have to give the clerk time to get in contact with witnesses and arrange them. So I would say that it's probably more reasonable to say that, we have witnesses in by, say, early next week, Monday or Tuesday. That then gives the clerk all of next week and the break week to arrange the witnesses to start the study for the week after. And I think at the same time as we're asking for witnesses for the human resources study, we also submit some witnesses on COVID as well. And maybe we should determine how many we'll do, because if we're giving half the time on COVID, devoting half time to COVID, then maybe, firing in 4 or 5 witnesses that we each want to hear from on COVID. We can give the clerk time to schedule that as well. But I think it's far too fast to try to get this done for tomorrow.
Ms. Kramp-Nyman?
Oh, just a point of clarity with regards to the length of briefing. You suggested that we should try and sort out how long they should be. I don't know whether there's a standard length. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Just, is there a standard length of briefing? This is new to me. No?
I'm advised by the clerk that the standard limit is normally 2,000 words. So if we're not reinventing the wheel, that's probably a good measuring stick. He indicates that it's sometimes it's framed as 10 pages, otherwise 2,000 words.
Okay, thank you. If that's the will of the group.
Okay. Mr. Lake?
So I take Mr. Davies' advice. The one suggestion then I would say is that we'd kind of pass that we would go even COVID and numbers of non-COVID studies. So if we're going to use the first 2 meetings next week on COVID, we can also then discuss our plan forward on COVID as part of that conversation. So I don't think we need to decide that now in terms of witnesses. And then I would just suggest then that the first two meetings when we come back, so that we get a good start after the break, the first two meetings then are human resources study, and following that week, we start alternating again, Mondays being COVID, Wednesdays being human resources. So does that make sense? So next week, as Mr. Davies suggested, two meetings both on COVID, at which time we also discuss our plan moving forward on the COVID side of things. And coming out of the break, the first two meetings on human resources. Okay? And when I didn't catch when the deadline would be then for witnesses, Mr. Davies?
Yeah, what I heard was Monday, Tuesday next week.
Monday, Tuesday next week? Does that, I mean, that's an extension
that's
from where
what
we
he
were talking
proposed.
about.
Yeah.
Can I just throw out, while I just have the floor, that there's nothing to stop us from, we could put forward a preliminary list of witnesses. There's nothing to stop us from adding more names as the study goes on. We might have some ideas as the study goes on.
Mr. Okay. Dr. Hanley, please.
Yeah, recognizing the time, I think there's definitely merit in what Mr. Lake is saying, but at the same time, I think it would be easy to get certain witnesses lined up for next week to kind of set the stage for what then might be might help us to be able to plan more methodically the next few meetings. So I think that one, I think it serves to sort of meet the priority aspect of this. That you know we are really concerned about the state of our workforce, and it would I think it would really help us give us the time to make the future meetings successful. So I would respectfully submit that we might do it that way. Given I'm pretty confident we can have a good setting the stage witnesses for next week.
Mr. Johari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely support my colleague, Mr. Hanley, but if I may suggest a compromise. If we start as agreed on Monday on COVID, do our best to make sure that we get witnesses for Wednesday on the study on HHRs, and if not, and if we could not get any witnesses, then we move into doing the second meeting on COVID. That way, we have a backup plan. We have a plan that we move forward and a contingency plan if we couldn't get the witnesses. However, I believe we would be able to get witnesses for the Wednesday meeting on this study.
Mr. Davies.
Well, we have a couple of different suggestions. You know, I guess I'm not going to repeat what I said. I like Mr. Lake's suggestion. I think that's eminently reasonable. You know, we could start by next week, but you know, we have a very busy day tomorrow in the House. I think I can speak for some of us. I mean, we have an opt-day motion on healthcare. We're tied up on that. It's not fair to the committee to say you've got tomorrow to fire in your witnesses. I want to think about the witnesses that I want to put forward. I want to consult some of the witnesses, and it takes some time. There's no pressing reason that we have to rush to do this for next Wednesday. It's also, again, the practical reality is it's difficult for the clerk to contact and line up witnesses on 4 business days' notice. I don't see any real reason to rush this process that fast. When you know for you know a week and a half to get started. Also, of course, there's going to be some. I think there's going to be some overlap of witnesses. It might take some time to work that out. So anyway, I just stand by what I said. I think we should have until the end of Monday to get in our witnesses on the health study. We take COVID. I like Mike's suggestion about taking the second meeting next week, not only to finish off the briefing, but maybe have a chat about how we might want to structure the COVID, like what kind of issues we might want to look at that might be helpful. And then, of course, we also have to get in our witnesses on COVID. I'm okay with the week after the break week, both meetings being on the healthcare human resources study. That means there'll be 8 witnesses called that we have to prepare for. Then the week after that, of course, we're going to have a meeting or 2 on COVID. So, I think all those of us that have served on committees, you have some sense of the cadence of these things and how long things take. And it seems like a really easy thing. Well, just get your witnesses in tomorrow and we'll schedule them. It usually takes a little bit longer than that. So I stand by my suggestion on the end of business day Monday, and with Mr. Lake's schedule.
Mr. Lake?
Listen, we need to make a decision before the end of this meeting. And, I listen to my Liberal colleagues here, and the compromise they're suggesting makes some sense too. I could go either way, quite honestly. But given that there are, 5 members of the Liberal Party and colleagues here, just a reminder to Mr. Davies, what we discussed here is that we don't need to put our full witness list here. We just need to get some preliminary witnesses out so that we have a good first meeting, as Dr. Hanley brought up in his comments. Maybe that's just the way we go, just to get something moving. Preliminary witnesses, we can decide, let our steering committee decide when we need to get our main list of witnesses together, but enough to have one meeting and get started. In the interest of compromise, in the interest of moving on, I think we've had a great meeting, and I'm willing to agree with Dr. Hanley and Mr. Jawari.
Mr. Van Couverton.
Thank you. Just very briefly. Unfortunately, we've spent quite a lot of time, and I think it's really, really important that we get to work. And I respectfully submit that we should start our human health resources study on Wednesday. I appreciate that from my colleagues from the Conservatives. I think we owe it to Canadians to get right to work as quickly as possible, just preliminary witnesses, and have our first HHR study on Wednesday. That's my position. Thank you.
Dr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley, do you want to make something?
No. Oh, okay.
Am I the one? Am I speaking? Yeah. So my suggestion, and it would be to Dawn, if
Dr. Hanley has the floor.
Oh,
No, I give way to Marcus, as long as it's
say the right thing.
agree.
As long as I say the right thing.
Mr. Johari has the floor.
Okay, now I'm the one who's going to yield it to Marcus. Marcus, go ahead.
And I'm going to give it to Sonia. No, I think in its appeal to Dawn, I think if you go with what Brendan has suggested, then next week we would have the first one on COVID, and then the second one, like the Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Nursing Association, a general overview of the problem with shortages. And we think that getting, for example, Canadian Medical Association, Canadian Nursing Association, a few academics who want to talk about in general the situation in terms of workforce shortage, that would be easy enough to do, and then we could get going. We have a plan for next week. So,
Mr. Davies.
So then, I'm sorry, what's the proposal then? If we are going to get our briefing on Monday, and then Wednesday we'll start the human resources study, what is the deadline for getting a few witnesses in? I didn't hear what Dr. Hanley's suggestion was. And by the way, I think we also should pick a date to get witnesses in for COVID then to start when we come back.
Okay. Dr. Hanley, do you want to respond to that? And I'm going to go to Mr. Bertrand.
Sure. I didn't necessarily submit it, but I think the advice that we received on the floor was end of day tomorrow to have that preliminary list.
For next Wednesday.
For next Wednesday.
Friday or next week.
But not a hard deadline for a final witness list.
Correct.
Okay. Monsieur Bertrand, s'il vous plaît.
C'est ce que je voulais dire.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. Out of respect for the motion, we need to have a list. We cannot decide on a consensus basis to have this or that association because there is no consensus to now split the witnesses by political parties because this is a proposal that had been accepted. So I think we need to have the time to present the witnesses on the list. So I think until, tomorrow night, we present our witnesses and then we'll see what will happen for Wednesday's committee. Now, unfortunately, this motion does not allow us to reach consensus and to have briefings from national organizations because now we need to choose our witnesses based on a political party.
People on the speakers list, but we're now at 2 hours. Please allow me to summarize what we have agreed upon and maybe get a nod of the head. We've agreed that we're going to have a briefing from the analyst on COVID on Monday. It appears that there is emerging consensus that the workforce study will commence on Wednesday, that members will get their witness lists, their preliminary priority witness lists in as soon as possible, and that the maximum length of briefs will be 2,000 words. I think that's where we are, but I'll recognize the last couple of speakers on the list, Mr. Lake and then Mr. Davies.
I'm good with that.
Mr. Davies?
I'm good with that too, although Mr. Berthold makes a good point. Although I would just say that getting some witnesses in so we can have a meeting next Wednesday to fire in the first, 4 witnesses, I'm fine with, figuring out the math later on. Because of course we have a break week after that. So I think we all put some witnesses in, and then I'll leave it to the clerk and the chair at your discretion to choose the 4 witnesses next week. And if we'll have plenty of time to make it square with the motion passed, I think, in terms of the proportion of witnesses.
I agree, and I appreciate that confidence. I would now like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is it the will of the meeting to adjourn? Consensus in the room? Thanks, everyone. We got some stuff done today. Have a good evening. We're adjourned.